We'll kind of do what we can in an hour, and then if you are interested in more or not, that'll be your choice, but there are ways in which we can get a bit further into it. And then if you can go to slide 3 with the expectations, I'll just give you an outline of what we will be hoping to think about today. So the 4 things that I'd love to tackle today are: think about why joy matters and why it's important, and just a full acknowledgement that I know joy is not the favorite word in the English language. This is very American, but it certainly gets reactions. And so I think we keep it in because it triggers something, it triggers feelings. We're going to talk about the very, very basic fundamentals of the psychology of joy. So what some models offer us as being components of joy and where we can find this in healthcare. Find out what joy is not, because I think quite a lot of people work on joy without necessarily hitting their target, and then they think that joy becomes a bit pointless, and we're going to figure out why that can go wrong. And then we're going to talk about a what matters to you conversation. But the first thing I'd like to do is, this is my 1-year-old daughter. She is both the most joyful person I know and also a source of immense joy to me. In fact, my greatest joy. And I'm just wondering if you could indulge me in thinking about joy is deeply personal to us, and it taps into our fundamental values and into the deepest understanding of our own identity. Could you, as a check-in, just write who you are and what the thing that gives you greatest joy in your life is? Not at work, but in your life. So mine is this little girl. What is yours? Just who you are, what you do, and what really gets you dancing in life. It sounds like such promising typing. People that are writing letters about what brings them joy. That's very cool. Ellie, dogs, food, and nature. I almost read dog food, and then I thought that can't possibly bring her the most joy in her life, but dogs, food, and nature. That makes sense. People, yep, this comes up a ton of time. Quality time and people. Reading, writing, and movies. Charles, you sound like a very artsy type. Nieces and nephews, I love that. Love that also because that sounds like children. Grandchildren, obviously. Granddaughters, yeah, okay. Holidays, lots of family, lots of traveling. Family and movies. Okay, there's so family, people, and kids seem to be a real theme. Dogs, I'm afraid, have only come up twice. Relaxing, development, reading. Oh, I love this. Coming home to a warm and lit house full of people with a hot shower, books, and fresh clothes. This is so lovely. Something I love is walking past windows in the winter and seeing the lights on inside and wondering how it feels like to be inside that house. Fresh clothes. Okay, so with this lovely intro and understanding outdoors again, hi Philippa, we are going to sort of go into why we started thinking about joy in the first place. And this work around joy, the idea of working around joy is about 9 years old, so it's not a minute old. And when we initially kicked it off, the reason that we started the journey was because of the huge gap between what drives people to healthcare and what they experience in their daily life. I think for most of you on this call, at some point in your life, when you chose to join general practice, there must have been an ambition to be helpful, to achieve meaning and purpose, to be of service to your community. And when we started this work, I think that the realization was that no one felt that they had time to achieve that original vision, and that certainly work didn't feel joyful. And so we started thinking about, if we can't change the Carhill formula, if we can't bring extra money to general practice, if we can't disentangle the NHS from politics, what can we do with what is in our daily reach to enhance people's experience of joy in their working environment? Next slide, Adele. So Deming is one of the founders of quality improvement. And I think we are especially wed to his model. When I say we, I mean Equip. And maybe I should have done this intro sooner. I'm Virginia. I'm program director for Equip, which is a program that brings quality improvement to practice. And I'm also a managing partner in a practice in Tower Hamlets called the Jubilee Street Practice. And Deming is a bit of a hero, I think, for people that work in quality improvement. And he thinks about joy as a human right almost, thinks that people are entitled to joy in the workplace and that it's a managerial responsibility to bring that joy into the workplace and make work joyful. Meaning, if you have staff surveys that demonstrate that 60% of your staff is disgruntled about something or other, it is their right to have a better experience. And it's a manager or a supervisor's duty to make sure that that happens. So today is thinking about some of the ways in which we can do that for our staff and for ourselves in the meantime. Next slide. Now, burnout is a real issue. I'm talking specifically about physician burnout, so GP burnout, but burnout is an issue in healthcare systems in general, no matter who it impacts. There are three main groups that burnout impacts. The first is organizations and practices. Practices tend to have more legal issues, more court cases, their productivity is lower, the gaps between appointment is longer, the variation between appointment length is longer. So practices that have people that take 13 minutes on a call, practices that have people that take 4 minutes on a call. Absence of variation is the leading cause of loss of clinical safety in general practice. Part-time work is rife. I think probably none of us know any GP or very few nurses even that work full-time because it's very difficult to sustain the role, and staff turnover is huge. And post-COVID, I think this is especially true. Patients are just as impacted by lack of joy and presence of burnout. There's a much greater risk of non-adherence to guidelines. There's a greater risk of mistakes, lack of safety, tired GPs, lower empathy levels. We often hear GPs that say, I've lost my empathy with patients. We see patients as a chore, as a burden. We call them frequent attenders, frequent flyers. We talk about need, not want. We really become very thin, I think, in terms of our empathy towards patients, and that results towards lower patient satisfaction. A really consistent correlation is between levels of satisfaction in staff and levels in satisfaction in patients and safety. Mid Staffordshire had amongst the lowest satisfaction survey results in the nation for 5 or 6 years running at the time of their scandal. And this was also associated with the lowest levels of patient satisfaction. If we don't listen to indicators of low satisfaction in patients and in staff, we're essentially running unsafe clinical services. And then, of course, that impacts individuals personally. Physicians that have high levels of burnout have much higher levels of coronary artery disease. Their divorce rates are higher. Divorce rates on average are 21 to 22%. In clinicians, it's clinicians that experience burnout, it's close to 25%. Psychiatrists and surgeons particularly have the highest divorce rates that range from 33 to 50% for psychiatrists. Make what you will with this stat, but burnout is certainly associated to higher divorce rates and disruptive behavior, which leads to drug abuse. And they have 2 to 4 times as high suicide rates as the rest of the population in the UK. So really, really meaningful. Burnout is harmful to GPs and clinicians, harmful to patients, harmful to practices. So our aspiration was joy, but joy well beyond just not being burnt out. We want joy to be something that you can't necessarily define, because it's a bit like this picture. It's kind of the dust that glimmers in the sun. But we wanted people to be able to reconnect to what brought them into work and lower all these risks at practice level, at patient level, and at individual level for clinicians that work in general practice. And next slide, Annette. I'd like you now to come away from what you were initially sharing about what brings you joy in your life and think about at work. Can you share one thing that really floats your boat, something you love at work that makes for a great day, and something that sinks your ship? The best things that can happen to enhance your sense of joy, and the most annoying things, draining things that can happen in your workday that take you away from connecting to your purpose. And again, if you can pop that in the chat, what floats your boat, what sinks your ship around joy? And feel free to say it if you don't want to put it in the chat. No one has to be silent for 60 minutes, although I know that that's the way we talk now.
For me, sorry, I'm going to go. For me, I would say float my boat is interaction with the kids when I go into school for screening. The interaction with the little kids, that's my joy. And the sink ship will be when I have to wake up early in the morning in order to make it there.
Those are really unusual answers. I think I can say that I've never heard either of those, so we can build on those for sure. So friendly patience, and thank you for saying it out loud. Anybody else that wants to speak is very welcome to. Banana cake, I can testify to Salma's banana cake. It brings us joy too. Unhappy patients, I'm guessing that's the drain. Joe, you mentioned interaction with patients or staff face to face. I hope that's the floats your boat, not sink your boat, or we're in the wrong profession. And helping people make a difference. Admin is the horrible stuff, paperwork and IT not working, which I guess is what makes us distant from people. Patient complaints, yep, they sink my ship too. Sinking your ship, hearing that a crucial member of staff is sick. So we go back to that bit around high absence leaves. Okay, seeing real impact. I can really relate to that. I think, Anne, you've unmuted yourself. I'm going to remute you. There we go. Okay, so this is basically just a point to say there are bits that we know enhance our day, bits that do not. And I think the thing we focus on less because of absence of headspace is how do we build those hygiene factors, those positive factors that drive us closer to purpose to enhance our feelings of joy? And are we able to remove any of the niggles or the pebbles that you've just listed now? The interesting thing about joy is that it can be learned. You're not sort of born a happy person or born a sad person. To an extent you are, but you do have neuroplasticity, which when practiced allows feelings of well-being to enhance and be expanded. And the main ones are around awareness, connection, insight, and purpose. So today's conversation is about, are there things we can do to help widen those bits that make your day more joyful through the exercise of these 4 neural circuits? And what tools can we use to do that? Because your brain can change to expand the areas that allow well-being to enter more freely and sort of restrict those areas that feel, I guess, a bit disempowering in terms of you being able to align to your purpose and to the reason that you chose this profession in the first place. Next slide, Adele. There are tons of frameworks for thinking about joy. I'm going to go through the top, I think, 4 or 5 that I came across when I was thinking about joy in the workplace initially. The first is the oldest, and this comes from Harvard Business School, and it goes to demonstrate a really interesting fact, which is when we ask people, without showing them this slide, what do you think are the things that people feel most motivated by at work? They don't always guess the right ones because money seems to be something that comes up quite frequently, whereas instead money tends to be a very low hygiene factor and a very high dissatisfaction factor. And what's interesting in this slide, the main message from this slide, I won't read it to you because you can read it yourself, but the things that make you happy are not the things that make you sad. And the things that bring you down are not the things that bring you up. This means if we just get rid of dissatisfaction factors, we won't necessarily be happier. If we just bring in things that make us happier, we do nothing to dissatisfaction factors. And we have to think about these both in parallel. That's how I frame the question to you. What makes you happy and what drives you down? You can't work in service of one without working in service of the other. These two things run along binary tracks. And the most interesting thing around these, I mean, you can, I don't know how much of this chimes with you, but one of the things that I find most interesting is that administration is easily the highest dissatisfaction factor. And this came up from your answers in the chat. And achievement, which I think means meeting your goal, meeting your aims, delivering impact, is by far the highest. This means you don't have to be giving people massive salary raises, which we also know only have an impact up until a certain level, which I think is about £70,000 a year, beyond which they're completely meaningless in terms of driving joy. And they also have a very limited value in time. So once somebody does get a raise, their satisfaction in their work averages about 3 months. After 3 months, they'll once again start thinking that the work that they do deserves more recognition and more money. It is not a permanent solution to fixing the issue of recognition and happiness in the workplace. What we do know about money is that people tend to be more joyful when the peers are on equal footing in terms of remuneration. So if my salary GP, one of them is paid, I don't know, £10,500 per annualized session, and another is paid 12,300, I have a real issue there. I'm very likely to incur feelings of dissatisfaction and conflict. If both of these are paid at 10,500, I'm much likelier to have staff that recognizes harmony in the recognition and the acknowledgement of their work than if I have discordance, I guess, between pay bands. Next slide, Adele. This is the simplest way of looking at joy. It is easily my favorite. I think I could enter a debate with Anne on this call around this, but it is a very, it's a very basic view of joy that slightly disentangles some of the moral structures that I feel many of us as a society and as GPs are brought up into believing or feeding into. So this one says, joy has two types. You can have hedonic joy, then you can have eudaimonic joy. Your eudaimonic joy is something like your connection to meaning, your connection to purpose, your connection to your values. Your hedonic joy is the material, sensual, thing-based satisfaction that you get from your life. I'll give you an example of the difference between these two. There's a very famous piece of research that looks at satisfaction in people in their 30s when you compare people that have children and people that have no children. People that have no children between the ages of 30 and 37 are something like 6% happier than people that have children. However, if you take that same sample and you ask that same question 10 years later, when they're 65 and nearing or post-retirement, the cohort with children is about 9% happier than the cohort that never had children. So the difference in this is, in your whole life, you will always be balancing eudaimonic joy and hedonic joy. If your kids are awake, they take away your sleep, you can't get into your mattress, you have no money to go out or go to restaurants, you can't afford a babysitter, and you haven't taken a shower, your hedonic joy is so low that it's very hard to tap into your eudaimonic joy, which is the amazing value of a child. As you get older and all these hedonic factors, I guess, adjust, your ability to tap into your eudaimonic joy becomes much, much higher. And at parity of hedonic joy, you will be a happier person because you had children and they gave you meaning and motivation and happiness and family and everything around it. What this means for us in general practice, and again, there's a ton of research and literature that's been written around this. People that work in healthcare tend to model the populations they serve. So in a very deprived part of East London, we will behave in a way that needs to model the behaviors and the needs of our patients. And the more we suffer and deprive ourselves and wear Crocs and white socks and eat sandwiches from Asda, the more we feel worthy almost of achieving our aspiration and our purpose in healthcare. And actually, it's the opposite. All we do is drive down our own joy and satisfaction to match the patient's profiling of disease and deprivation. And now we're all unhappy, but at least we don't feel guilt. We've almost paid the price for our guilt. And instead, we know that in healthy models of healthcare in the workplace, people do invest in the care and the experience, in the material pleasure of people that deliver healthcare because it makes them better at serving the patients. And as an outcome, patient satisfaction is higher. So there's no virtue really in having 20 quid as a budget for your learning lunch, because people that eat well, that are fed well, that have a warm room, where the decor is taken care of, where you're not feeling guilty if you buy people a cake to celebrate, these people provide care in a better way. And this slide, which is actually my favorite in the pack, is only here to illustrate that there's no point in thinking about purpose and value if you think that you have to do that at the expense of any joy or sensual recognition for your sensory pleasures or the way that you experience your space, your food, your taste buds, your eyes, etc., etc. Next. This is a more, this is a less material slide. This is from Mike Viking, and he acknowledges, or he thinks, having looked at joy across communities, so this isn't healthcare, this is more looking at nations and communities across the world, that the 5 main components of joy are community and togetherness. So the better defined your community, the higher your experience of joy. As an example of that, this is so interesting. They've done a study in Australia that shows that communities that live in cul-de-sacs, so where your car can't drive through, it's not an open street, are significantly more joyful, feel safer and more connected than communities where you can drive straight through onto another road. The more tightly defined your community, the more defined your geographical space, the higher your feeling of identity, joy, and purpose. Wealth obviously is a component of joy, but as referred to earlier, it's a relative component of joy. This isn't about you being rich, it's you being as rich as your closest peer. And that is definitely a determining factor in your satisfaction. Health, that goes without saying, everything from mindfulness, your body being healthy, your ability to access a bicycle to go on a home visit, getting your body moving. This is kind of the one that we need to preach to the least. Freedom. Freedom is about the ability of enabling mastery in people not needing to ask for permission, not needing to have a manager that authorizes the expression of their talent, their ability to make a decision, really having a model of leadership that lets go and offers inclusivity and a recognition of talent is something that enables people to have joy. And there's a high correlation between communities and populations which express high trust and which also express high levels of joy. So Portugal is one of the most joyful communities or countries in the world, and it expresses the highest level of trust when people are asked, if you drop your wallet in the street, how likely do you think you are for someone to return the wallet? Portugal, Norway, and a couple of others think that it's 85% likely people will give back your wallet. The UK rate's really lowly. People think people will walk away with their wallet. And it's also amongst the lowest in terms of European ability to tap into joy as a people. Next slide. And this is the formal slide. So if I had to only do one slide in an hour, this is the one I would need to show you because it's the one that at the moment is internationally recognized by the Institute of Healthcare Improvement and their framework for improving joy. There are a ton of words on this slide and we can send it to you, but I just want to explain how it's framed because it took me the first time, I think, 10 minutes to understand why the various shapes and lines. What this slide basically says is there are 9 components to joy. Safety, meaning and purpose, choice and autonomy, recognition and rewards, being able to participate in management, camaraderie and teamwork, working on daily improvement, your own personal wellness and resilience, and having access to real-time data to measure your change. These are the 9 components. You'll see that most of them, over half of them, overlap with stuff we've already talked about. Being able to co-produce managerial structures goes into mastery and autonomy. Choice and autonomy goes into mastery and autonomy. Meaning and purpose, we've discussed this in terms of the eudaimonic joy. Psychological safety is again eudaimonic joy. Many of these we've already discussed. The things that this model adds are the daily improvement, so your ability to make change on a daily basis in a healthcare environment and real-time measurement. The reason this slide is particularly important is that it's the only slide that has reference specifically to the healthcare industry. All the other slides make reference to nations, communities, the firefighting industry, or a number of others. But this is the one that best defines the components within healthcare. And the second thing that it does in a really powerful way is it tells you who is responsible for what, which the other models don't do. So here it tells you that senior leaders, which I guess would be traditionally maybe your partnerships, are responsible for all of these components, making sure that all of these components are having their place in practice. Managers and core leaders are only responsible for half of them, making sure that, so I guess maybe these are your supervisors, your practice managers, making sure that you're using real-time measurement, that people's resilience is looked after, that you are working on daily improvement, and that the teams are nurtured and cared for. And instead, individuals are only responsible for using measurements in their work, thinking about their own resilience, and working on daily improvement. They're not responsible for all of it. They don't need to fight for their psychological safety, raise their hand really, really high to be heard, beg for an award or for an extra day of annual leave or for an employee of the month. They are not responsible for that. It tells you exactly who is responsible for what, and the senior leaders being responsible for the overall culture that enables all of this and makes none of this a battle for anyone. Next slide. So if I was to kind of distill it and give you a summary, I guess, of what the entire white paper of the IHI suggests as the 5 needs for joy in the workplace. They say be accessible and do not normalize. Be accessible means, ideally, they describe it as work with your door open. Make sure that people know where you are. You don't look frazzled. You don't look like you're losing your mind and no one can come to you with a question. Be the person that someone can come to. And do not normalize is my second most important thing in this whole pack. Anybody that's heard this talk has heard this example time and time and time again, but it is such a powerful study. And this was done in the 1980s in 2 buildings in Manhattan, where you had these 2 identical buildings. Imagine them as council flats that were side by side. They both had glass doors. In a comparative study, they break the glass door of one of these 2 buildings and observe the evolution of behaviors over time of both inhabitants of these 2 buildings. Building A continues with its, broadly speaking, social behaviors. Mail gets put in the mailbox. There isn't trash left on the doorway. There aren't cigarette stubs on the floor. Building B, once this glass is broken and it does not get repaired, after a few days, someone leaves some junk mail. No one picks it up. A couple of days later, the mail comes in, gets landed on the floor. No one picks it up. A couple of days later, some cans are added. No one picks it up. By normalizing behaviors very, very slowly, like frogs in water, the first time you think, I don't have time, or this isn't big enough, I can't really address this minor transgression. Once you normalize a behavior, your tolerance standards go up and up and up and up until you have created an environment where it becomes very difficult to offer feedback and share accountability in a way that feels safe and not extraordinary. And because I'm in England, I can say this. The very best example that we've had in recent years of this is Donald Trump, and the very, very, very slow way in which behaviors that would have previously put you in jail or certainly gotten you out of a job have suddenly become so normalized that it almost becomes, I don't know, you think that it's normal news when you see a bit of embezzlement or a bit of fraud because worse has happened before. So normalization, the key risk to good psychological safety and practice. Meaning and purpose means create spaces that are only for thinking. Do not only book your surgeries, your practices, your PLTs, but make space. You have protected space for nothing. There's no agenda. There's no learning outcome. There's no, by the end of today, we will achieve. They are spaces for thinking and being silent, sitting in a room and sharing what comes up. What are the feelings? What are the thoughts? What sparks creativity? But being really intentional about ring fencing protected space for thinking, which is something we do, I think, very intentionally in the practices that we work with. Choice and autonomy, making sure that people can participate in management, open floor meetings and huddles. We tend to use effective meeting skills, no preset agendas, no minutes that get sent out, actions only, people meet, take on different roles and responsibilities which rotate. And fairness and equity, just being able to say, I'm sorry, I did something wrong, this didn't work, and modeling that behavior for others. So those would be the 5 main components. What joy, you can go to the next one, I like the pizza. What joy definitely is not something you say you're about to do. We are now working on joy. From today, we are doing a 3-week pilot on joy. Let us all buy pizza for practice on Fridays, and that is our contribution to joy. And it is not a gift you give anyone. Joy is for everyone. If you practice it, it comes back to you. If you believe it, you will practice it. If you are consistent with it, it does not become a project or something you do once and then put away to see if the intervention you made people a bit happier for a limited moment in time. Please do not buy a pizza on a Friday and think that you're working on joy in the workplace, even when we know that food is the single greatest driver of joy in the workplace. It has an impact of about 27%, huge impact, but a pizza is not going to fix a culture of joy because it doesn't address all 9 of those requirements that we saw on the wheel. Next slide, Adele. So this is a bit of like my inspirational slide, and it's just to kind of remind us as a group, I guess, that joy is not about thinking about something you are going to do or a task you are going to assign in service of joy. But joy is about thinking about what we can do as a collective to enable a culture that allows us to remember why we came into general practice in the first place. And what can we do in practice on a daily basis that teaches us, again, to long for the endless immensity of the sea, which is basically that sea that brought us into the profession before some of it went downhill about 20 years ago. But next slide. I'm going to give you a 2-minute brief on what matters to you conversations, because this is some of what we offer practices. And it's the reason I'm sharing it is because it is a recognized official tool, again, shared and designed by the Institute of Healthcare Improvement. It's their main tool for enabling the joy framework in general practice. And it's predicated around, next slide, Adele. It's predicated around entering teams and asking people in a safe, non-judgmental, inclusive space what matters to them and what brought them to choose that profession in the first place. Think about the things that get in the way between, and there are techniques around how you ask this question, how you move to the second one. This is not a 10-minute conversation that goes up the 4 steps straight away. It's a very slow and thoughtful process. But once you know what you want to get to, thinking about what it is that's not enabling that now, that makes that not a reality, and thinking about what would it mean for us in our space, in our practice, in our team, in our reality, to commit to a shared responsibility around how we are going to align to what we define as the things that matter to us, and then using a coached improvement science to one by one, remove the dissatisfaction factors, enhance the hygiene factors, and measure, remember that real-time measurement, which is everybody's responsibility in practice. Use daily improvement and real-time measurement to track how close you can get to achieving that sense of purpose and meaning that had drawn you into your job at the beginning. We have people that are trained in this, they know how to do it, they do it in teams, they do it in groups, and it's one of the offers that we give to practices in terms of something that we hope will enhance their patient's experience and lower their staff burnout. And just to give you ideas of some of the initial outcomes that we were able to measure when friends and family was still a metric that we could access, practices that had real-time data and worked on daily improvement had an improvement in their friends and family test, a statistically meaningful improvement of about 8% as compared to control groups that did not undertake this journey to removing the pebbles and enhancing the hygiene factors. So happier staff basically means happier patients for sure. What we want to do is understand what matters to you, how to build on your assets, and what we can work on together. I've just kind of explained that. Next slide. Now we get to my 10 quick ideas, which I think from the emails that I got, lots of people had logged in to hear about, and not all of them are necessarily attainable today. But this is just to say, no one's coming to do this for you. No one is coming. Can you go back a bit to the shopping bag slide with the baguette? There we go, because that's my joy, is the bread and the baguette in the shopping bag. But there is no one that's coming to do this for you, but it is about you today. If you feel any connection to this conversation, to these principles, you are someone that can make a change immediately by either getting in touch with us or doing this yourself, but by being the catalyst for your own change today. If we had waited for permission, authorization, funding, I don't know, accolades to start doing this work, it would have never started. It started from a group of people who just wanted to get cracking and make people's working day better. And I'm going to give you 10 ideas around some of the things that we know enhance or espouse some of these principles of joy. So the first one, this is the hardest one. It's the one that takes most time, but I think it's the principle behind it that might say something to you in terms of how you think about your practice. There is a there's a significant body of evidence, and there are about 260 organizations worldwide that use flat management structures through a platform called Green Frog. But anyway, there are many ways that you can define it, many platforms through which you can measure this. But it's a holacracy model that is the opposite of a pyramid model in terms of partners, salary GPs, ACPs, nurses, healthcare assistants, practice manager, admin staff. It doesn't work like that. It's based on circular structures where people are assigned to a task and have complete autonomy within that task. They don't need to, so say for example, so Jubilee Street, we identified, I think it was 82 tasks. Some of them are clinical, some of them are related to practice management, some of them are related to clinical governance, some of them are related to quality, some of them are related to patient experience. But we've broken down all the tasks that we offer and then wrapped people around the delivery of that task, and they are responsible for that task from start to finish. You don't ask somebody if you can make a change to the pathway, if you can have a budget to do this piece of work, if you can get these newsletters printed out. You are autonomous and responsible within that group for carrying out the functions in that task. Your mastery, your autonomy, and your freedom are as wide as we can make them. And we encourage people within that to bring their whole self. There is no hierarchy. A GP's view does not trump an administrator's view until that view has been proven to have failed. And for that, you have real-time measurement, which I think is the safety element that keeps this a doable project. Next slide, Adele. This is what it looks like. These are the circles on our wall. On the circles, you have the names of the people that carry out the circle. And next slide. And this is a picture, I'm going to say what the next slide is because I know what it is. This is a picture of two of our administrators who have unbelievable life stories, which again, when I have a longer session, I go into because I find them very meaningful to making the point to this. But these are two administrators who got us the Employee Overall Organization Award of the Year in 2018, without any impact, material supervision or contribution from anybody senior. They put it together. They went to the Black Tie Award. They won 2 awards that night, the one they had bid for and the Overall Knights Award. And this came through, this was all them, people on 20K that got us this recognition, this award, and this accolade for the practice. Next slide. Second idea, there is a lot of evidence that comes from Boston and North Shore around rooming or patient triage centers. These are rooms where clinicians are not individually placed in their own room to see the patient, but work in an MDT fashion within a wider environment where they are flanked by administrators, nurses, pharmacists, whatever R's roles you have, but they do the work together in a shared space. And they only use their consulting rooms essentially when they then need to see patients face to face. Technical rooming goes far beyond what I have done in my practice or what I've seen done where I've seen it done, which is places like Aberfeldy or Goodman's Field. And they go to the point where they kind of batch patients up, line them up in different rooms, have 3 people that see a patient. It's a very complicated model. We've kind of stripped it down and just put people together in a room to see if their experience of their work is more joyful when they are outside of an isolated environment. The key metric to this is that when you operate rooming models, your variation, clinical variation, decreases hugely. So before we had rooming, we had gaps between the length of a telephone call. So we had a mainly triage operated system where you had one clinician whose average telephone call was 14 minutes and one clinician whose average telephone call was 6 minutes. Anytime you see huge variation in practice, that is always a large alarm bell for safety purposes. And with rooming, this was a stat that we had studied in advance. We were able to get almost all clinicians within about a 2-minute time limit in terms of duration of calls, one from the other. This is obviously a better experience for the patient because it offers standardization, a more consistent service. It is safer in terms of continuity. It upskills administrative staff. The benefits to rooming are endless. And I can tell you without shadow of doubt that when pre-COVID, people used to come and visit the practice and ask people, what's the thing you love the most? If you asked any clinician after the banana bread, it was the rooming. The shared room service, if it's something you can pick up on, is hugely beneficial in terms of building camaraderie, teamwork, and personal resilience, a sense of personal resilience. Time banks and co-production, really key. Bromley Rabo are a fantastic leading example of this. but anywhere where you can get citizens and users to share services, share goods, share experiences for no material gain other than the connection and the enjoyment of that service. And this can look like anything. It can look like house swaps. It can look like tool swaps. It can look like shared books that you put. It can look like allotments outside your practice. It can look like anything where people get together to swap services and expertise. Next. Swap and share. So this is very similar to time banks. Actually, sorry, I'm kind of mixing the two up. So swap and share is, broadly speaking, what I've described before. Time bank goes a step further, and it's a model by which when you swap these services, you can often swap them for credits. And these credits, and there are places that do this across London, a place that starts with a B that has a fantastic market in East London. It's like a super famous market on East London. Somebody should put it in the chat because I'm sure it's in everybody's mind, but in mine. Anyway, they have a really fantastic model of time banking where patients give services to each other, get credits, and then that whole area is geared up to cash those credits in. So for example, if I do 3 haircuts to my local citizens, I will build up credits to get 1 free cinema ticket in my local Broccoli, probably. Anyway, whatever market it is. But if you think about time banking models, there are many ways of setting up local time banks that we haven't been able to do that in Tower Hamlets, but there are many time banking models in London that have been quite successful. Next, food and fire. This is my 3rd favorite slide. Maybe it's my 1st favorite slide. And this is just to say, if you were to think about one single component of joy, easily the one that has the most impact, more even than rooming. Rooming has about 23 to 27% impact. Food has 28% and above. This research was not done in the healthcare industry, it was done in the firefighting industry, but offering food to people and breaking bread together is such a catalyst to providing immediate impact on people's perception of joy. And food does not mean we all bring our own sandwiches and we sit in the room together. Food means you come upstairs and the table is set. The food is good. Someone has cooked it. Your glasses clink and your cutlery is made of metal. There is an intention to honoring your contribution to your practice in a way that looks like something that matters. It's something that basically demonstrates a commitment and an intention from the workplace. But if you can institute any type of shared nourishment within your practice, whether that is a centrally funded tea trolley, a centrally provided lunch, ideally every day. Lots of practices do that across NEL. Well, not lots, but a handful of practices do that across NEL. Some of them can do it once a week, but anything you can do to think about how can I show you nourishment and a sense of service through the provision of food is hugely impactful. Next. Okay. Well, I can thankfully talk to the slides because I've got them in front of me, so I might share my own screen of that if yours doesn't.
Crashing.
Okay, so I will then share my own screen. Give me just 2 seconds. No, no worries. It's not your fault.
In the meantime, I take the opportunity to say, please use the chat for questions and comments, because at the end we'll pass them through.
I will try and sort of wrap up within 5 to 10 minutes just to make sure that we have time. Can everybody see this? Can anybody see this?
No,
It's
we can't see
loading.
this.
No one is answering because it's loading.
No.
Okay. We've got a general crash. Okay, maybe then I'll just keep talking to them. I'm assuming it's still loading because no one's saying anything to me.
No, Virginia, let me download the slide. I think there is a problem with the link of the file.
Okay, well, I'm going to keep talking in the meantime. The last 3 were almost at the end. The last 3 were, the first one was around exercise and offering any type of opportunity for yoga in your practice, exercise bikes within your practice, ping pong tables, bikes to go off and do home visits, walks that you organize maybe with your local citizens or with your patients, but anything to get people's bodies moving. The 8th, some people that have been here longer might remember this, is mindfulness. Any investment that you can offer for collective mindfulness. I think about 9 or 10 years ago, Tower Hamlets paid to send us all off, well, all of us, some of us off to the London Buddhist Center and do an 8-week mindfulness course. But the practice of mindfulness, if encouraged by employers in appraisals, this comes up time and time and time again. I don't know how many people we've sent off for our mindfulness training. And the very last is around, actually the next to last, celebrating anything you do, celebrating achievements, celebrating when you've hit a target, using your real-time measurement, but just say when you've done something. Because if you don't say when you've done something, you could feel like you're never doing anything, because you don't really pay attention to those targets that we do hit and to the successes that we are embracing. So being really keen on celebrating. The next to last one is Employee of the Month. This is an example of a piece of work that was done in Denmark, where they rewarded employees, but not based on what they had achieved or typical success standards. The Employee of the Month was the one that gave others the most positive feedback. And it's a hospital that has continued to honor Employee of the Month in this way for 7 years now, I think, 7 or more years. And the last was investing in people's personal talent and mastery. So for a short period of time, you might consider offering a budget, maybe say £150 per person. That's just an idea, for them to invest in talents and skills that have nothing to do with work. They don't have to be linked to becoming a phlebotomist or learning about how to take a smear. It's nothing like that. What rocks your boat? Do you love doing makeup? Go on a course. Do you want to learn how to swim? How about you try it out? Do you want to go on a knitting course? Why don't you do that? Something that invests in their personal sense of wellness, resilience, and mastery. And that, again, there's evidence to show will come back both in added skills and to a better sense of well-being within the practice. Okay, this was like my final slide, and it was kind of a good one to have in mind because it has a summary. If you ever get the screen to work, Adele, if you can just stop on the single slide of the basket of tools. But I'm going to end it on what we can offer you to help you think about this journey. And this is not a sales pitch. We've got plenty of work. It's to leave you with something that you can think about sinking your teeth into, or you'll just sink your teeth into your own thoughts and do what you want around this. But the things that we can offer you, we can offer you a what matters to you conversation with your team, with your practice, with your wider practice, your small, whatever your team size is, we could do a what matters to you conversation and work you through that joy ramp. You could, without doing a what matters to you conversation, use a data wall and just pick an improvement project that you think that you might be able to have joy around working on. You could have a short-term contract for 6 sessions to try and fix one thing, one pebble in your shoe that you want some coaching around getting rid of. We have a ton of training on quality improvement. We know that people that have more staff trained in quality improvement sustain longer term gains. We have a team called Thinking Space, which is a group of people that help practices achieve that space where there is no agenda, that space where you just sit in a room and reflect on your identity, what you are working on, who you are as a team, and where you might go from there, if you're really willing to think about your culture in a collective way. We can help you think about the nature of your team. So a strengths deployment inventory, which kind of helps you understand the profiles of the people that are in your team, where you might have gaps and where you might have untapped opportunities. Or we can think about helping you through away days with whatever the aim would be for you. But I'm going to end it there because I have talked for 50 minutes, and we know that the adult attention span is about 40. So I'm 10 minutes over your attention. But I'm just going to end it there and think about whether anybody has any observations, questions, itches from this that they want to share. And it doesn't even have to be a question. It can just be something that has left you feeling with or a thought that it sparked as you were listening.
There is something in the chat that we shared slightly earlier.
Okay.
And I think like some comments are coming through now. We will share the slides for sure.
Yeah, Shahid, I don't know who you are, but this is extremely true. I'm having gone from, total recognition to, the bottom of the pile really quickly has been quite an experience and a demoralizing one. Yes, the slides can be shared, Nimshi. Joe, if you want support from our team, there is an email address on the very, very last slide. If you just ping this email address, a request, we can get in touch and see which of these things might be the one that you might want to pick up in your practice. And I love your point about sharing food is good as long as you're not focusing on practice in clinical scenarios. And I guess there's something about a mixture of that. Sometimes people want to focus on a clinical scenario because, I don't know, because sometimes it's nicer to have an MDT that has tasty food, or because they're carrying something from the morning. But I think that broadly speaking, it certainly has to be acknowledged as a place of nutrition, rest, and connection. And so I would say probably in my experience, there's a 40-60 split. 40 of it probably is dedicated to clinical topics, but 60% of it is dedicated to whatever you've seen at the cinema, what your kids are doing.
Otherwise it's a bit like sort of eating food at your desk, looking at your dot
Totally
map.
is. It
So
totally is.
so we don't really want that. We want to actually be able to focus on the people who are around us and just share our joys. Also talk about our niggles, but share our joys. But otherwise it just takes it completely away. You're just eating and you're not having the joy from the food and the joy from being with others.
I think you're absolutely right. Prioritizing connection. Shahid?
Sorry, I'm just going to unmute myself. I sorry to sound contrary. I did an MBA a long time ago, and I did a lot of this kind of stuff on under the OB, organizational behavior type of module. I think the problem is the place where I'm at the moment as a frontline GP is that nobody actually tells us I'm doing a decent job. And that comes from our leadership. So however much folk get commissioned by our ICB to do this kind of thing, however many well-being seminars I have, however much counseling I might get, the fundamental fact is there seems to be no appreciation from our ICB that we're actually manning the line here. And I think that probably what cuts to the core and prevents me from getting any sense of joy whatsoever. And if anything goes wrong, it's to do with us. If anything goes right, it's never to do with us. And I think the other thing is that you know how they say that abusers end up being people who are abused sometimes frequently end up being abusers themselves. The fact it's coming from another part of the profession in secondary care probably is another stab in the back. I appreciate. I seem very downbeat on this, but it's very difficult to get those glimpses of joy in your day-to-day when there are so many things that can be fixed and just there is no will to do so. I know that nobody's going to change the contract. Nobody's going to suddenly conjure up 1,000 GPs to run in East London or whatever, but there are things that people can do by not making my job any more difficult, and that are totally and utterly needless. But those are fixable things. And I think probably that is the thing that frustrates me the most. There are fixable things out there, but there just seems to be this inertia about doing anything about them because, you see, we're taken for granted, we're expendable.
I think I'm wondering how politically incorrect I'm going to be in my reply to you. I think what you're saying resonates hugely. I think it resonates with people on this call. It hugely resonates with me personally. And there's none of it. There really is none of it. I mean, this is such a long conversation. There is none of it that is untrue. And I think these two things, though, Shahid, like they need to stand together, because if the story begins and ends there, think that it's bad news for us, but it's awful news for our patients. And when we started doing this work, some of what you're describing was already there to a much lesser extent. I think we couldn't start it today because I don't think that there is that appetite that there was maybe 10 years ago to invest in the clinical profession and in general practice and in primary care. But I do think even more today, in all the challenges and the struggles that we're facing, it is so important to know how big is your locus of control? If what you're describing is true, and it is, what is your locus of control? If you're getting no recognition from these people that you look up towards, who can give you recognition today and who can you share recognition with today? I'm thinking about whether to say something, and I think I will say it. I I'm not waiting for a thank you letter from senior leadership for the work we do, for this work, for the unbelievable determination it takes to hold Joy for 9 years throughout what we have gone to. I think my choice is to look down and think about the people that speak my language and how we can make that journey feel meaningful, and hope that it really impacts on those patients that we happen to serve together. But what you're saying is true. And because of this, I think it's really important to focus on Teams and Joy, where you have control. Suzia.
Hello, Virginia. I just
Hi.
wanted to bring in, it's a bit of my own thinking, as we are going on to more and more these, courses as well. And I would agree with Dr. Dadaboy. In our meetings as well, there's more say about, Norway, all these countries when they talk about, but the systems there is less pressurized. And that's the biggest thing. And it comes from up. We can do in our teams as well, whatever we can in our control, but it has to come from up. So I just wanted to know, is there anything that these QI projects or Joy at Work that's been asked on that level, how they're going to, because it starts from up and it goes all the way
does.
down.
It so does. And again, I'm going to give you a very non-political answer, non-politically correct answer. There was a commitment about a year and a half or 2 years ago for some of this work to be taken at the most senior level, including at ICB and ICS level.
Yes.
That work, for many reasons, has been deprioritized, including a restructuring that is currently happening, which is removing about 40% of manpower resource from ICBs and ICSs. So the answer is no. Not at this moment in time. There is a commitment to a long-term framework for a shared culture of improvement. We'll see. But I think I go back to what I said to Shahid. It is a problem, and we can receive it or we can react to it. And I would say, Suzia, you are somebody's senior leader. I know you are. So I'm really sorry that your senior leadership is not showing up for you, but you're on this call. So maybe you can be a senior leadership that shows up for somebody else. Because I know that as a person, as Virginia, I have an impact on 45 people, and I'm going to use that impact. And it really stinks that other people are not using that impact for you, for me, for Shahid. It really stinks. It does. I'm sorry about that. But I still want to have an impact and have these calls.
And that's why we are all here, everybody, I think
know.
so everybody on this call has the same purpose.
I know. And thank goodness for that. Okay, guys, we've run out of time. Are there any, and I'm just going to make one point, because now this Scandinavia thing seems to become a thing. I'm not necessarily saying, in fact, I'm not even dreaming that we can sort of replicate Scandinavian or Northern European models. I'm just saying that there are psychological principles that can be of teaching, which we can interpret in our own work. That's all I'm saying with those. On this note, we are out of time, and I'm really keen that I don't keep you beyond it. But thank you for your ongoing presence in this. I hope that you've gotten something from this. You've got our email address if you want to get in touch. Very happy to work with you. And thank you for still believing in Joy enough to making an hour during your lunchtime for it. Thank you. And have a lovely day.
Thank
you
you.
so much,
Bye.
Virginia.
Bye, guys. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.